sales numbers for June, they soared up 11%, higher in many parts of the country. The only part where new home sales dropped, or geographical area where they fell in June, was actually in the South. They dropped about 5%. Part of the reason, even though mortgage rates are going up, look at that, 30-year fixed-rate mortgages, according to Bankrate.com, back up to 5.42%, is that many of the new home sellers, the Centexes, Pulte's, D.R. Hortons, Lennars, KB Homes of the world, are offering below-market rate financing, and you got the tax credit. So mortgage rates up, but new home sales up as well. Well, speaking of lending, in the wake of CIT's problems, small business loans have come back into focus. Small business is the driver of jobs in America, right? So what is the environment right now for small business lending? Chris Hurn is the CEO of Mercantile Commercial Capital. They are a firm that helps give out small business loans, primarily through the government's 504 program. Chris, we welcome you back to Fox Business. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me again, Brian.
Well, we had a owner of a mall on earlier. So let's say I wanted to start a shop in her mall. Could I get a loan today?
Yeah, you probably can. You've got to know which lenders to go to. Most of the big boys who have ratcheted back their lending, they're not going to be folks that you want to go to. Those are the zombie banks you should avoid. But a lot of community banks, non-bank lenders like ourselves, Mercantile Capital Corporation, we're still lending. We're still aggressive. We're really sort of mopping up the damage that has been caused by some of these bigger players out there.
Yeah, okay, but can other funders, can factoring, especially factoring firms, which was a big market CIT was in, can you guys collectively pick up the slack of the biggest small and mid-sized business lenders? I don't want to say failure, but certainly their very well-known problems.
I think the marketplace certainly can. I mean, that's the beauty of capitalism. I mean, the adaptive are the ones that survive. CIT had a lot of problems. Yes, they represented 70% of the domestic factoring market, but there's plenty of other factors out there that are lending. There's plenty of other lenders like my firm that are lending. It's funny. CIT did a lot of franchise business, and now, believe it or not, a lot of franchisors are returning our calls, who we've been calling on for years, because they finally realized the eggs all in one basket, the preferred lender model of CIT didn't really work real well for them, and now they're contacting us.
You know, even with post-Economic Recovery Act, which really is not post because it's just kicking in, talking stimulus,
right?
Small Business Administration loans have still fallen. Is that a reflection of lack of demand, people saying, I'm not starting a business? Or is that a reflection of the government actually lending out less?
Well, it's not so much the government lending out less.
Backing fewer loans through companies like yours, I guess would be the correct way to say it.
Not so much. I mean, yeah, we've the $15 billion in TARP funds that are going to be used to buy SBA debt hasn't materialized yet. They keep talking about it, but it still hasn't come into fruition, and it was announced back in March. That will add some liquidity to the marketplace. But no, there's plenty of other SBA dollars that are out there. In fact, ironically enough, just with one SBA program, the one I specialize in, the SBA 504, in the last 2 fiscal years, $3.3 billion was left on the table unspent, completely authorized. This year it's going to be $4 to $4.5 billion. All the SBA needs to do is get with the politicians and tweak some of their existing programs, and they can actually tap another source of funds and be a heck of a lot more dramatic of an impact than just this $255 million ARC program, which only did a few less than 400 loans in their first month of business.
So what can they do then? Because we've been doing segments, and you read articles about how sometimes in the worst downturns it is the best time to start a business. So what can we do as maybe potential small business owners, and what can the government do to come together?
Well, part of what the government needs to do is they need to understand that we have all these billions of dollars of funds that go unspent every year with the SBA's appropriations. What we need to do is tweak the existing SBA programs, such as the 504, allow for a true refinance, not this strings-attached expansion-only refinance that got all the headlines a couple weeks ago. We need to trust in the small business borrower to actually tap their embedded equity in their commercial property, for instance, and actually go and put those dollars to work. That's how they're going to retain jobs. That's how they're going to grow their market, their business itself. I mean, we've got to, as Americans, we need to put more pressure on the politicians to understand the real dynamics of what are happening in the Small Business Administration programs. It's obvious to me that the administration doesn't really grasp it. I mean, the administration has lauded this waiving of SBA loan fees, which is great, but the problem is SBA loan fees are always financed in the loan, so it wasn't an out-of-pocket expense for the borrower anyway. In a $255 million program for the ARC funds, a new program, it's not as sexy. It's sexier compared to tweaking existing programs, but the most a borrower can get is $35,000. I don't know about you, Brian, but that's a drop in the bucket for most small business owners out there. That's not going to be very effective, and you can see in the results in the first month of the program. We need to tweak some of the existing programs, get the capital to work, but we have to also understand that it's the banks that lend the money. So the banks need regulatory relief. It's not the SBA that lends the money, unless we declare disaster relief, and then the SBA can lend the money.
I hear what you're saying about the government and the Small Business Administration. Maybe it would help if somebody in a high level in the government had actually owned a small business.
That would certainly be helpful.
Because even the Economic Recovery Board is 3 or 4 major CEOs of publicly traded companies, a couple of union heads, a former SEC commissioner. What about John Smith, who owned, 6 gas stations? That's probably the guy you need to have on your Economic Recovery Board.
I've offered to talk about it. I own 3 different small businesses myself, Brian, but no one's called on me to talk about this stuff. But I'd be happy to provide some advice. There's some very fundamental things that we could do to get things going again.
There you go. Chris Hurn, CEO of Mercantile Capital. Chris, a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
All right. Just a note to the government, for anything you do, whether it's CARSAR, PAYSAR, have people who have actually done that job putting in that spot. All right. President Obama still pushing forward with his health care plan.